The bridge of the horizon's edge hummed with quiet activity. Captain Daniel Morrison stood near the main viewport, watching the stars drift by in the eternal darkness of space. His ship had been traveling for 3 weeks now, moving through a region of space that no human had ever explored before. The mission was simple: survey new systems, look for habitable planets, and avoid trouble. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on long-range sensors," Lieutenant Amy Grant said from her station. She was young, only 26, but she had sharp instincts that Morrison trusted completely. Morrison walked over to her console and looked at the screen. There were 7 large objects moving toward them at high speed. They were too big to be asteroids and moving too deliberately to be natural. "Ships," Morrison said quietly. "How long until they reach us?" 15 minutes at their current speed," Amy replied. Her fingers flew across her controls as she gathered more data. "Captain, these ships are huge. Each one is at least twice the size of the horizon's edge." Morrison felt his stomach tighten. First contact with an alien species was supposed to be a moment of celebration, a historic event. But something about the way these ships were approaching made him uneasy. "Wake everyone up," Morrison ordered. "Battle stations. And get me Greg Palmer on the line." The alarm began to sound throughout the ship. Crew members who had been sleeping or off duty rushed to their posts. Within 3 minutes, every station was manned and ready. Greg Palmer arrived on the bridge, still pulling on his jacket. He was the chief engineer, a man in his 40s who could fix anything with enough time and the right tools. "What's going on?" "We've got company," Morrison said, pointing at the screen. 7 unknown vessels incoming. I need you to make sure all our systems are running at full capacity." Greg nodded and moved to the engineering console. He started running diagnostics, his experienced eyes scanning the data quickly. The alien ships grew larger on the screen as they approached. They were dark gray with sharp angles and strange symbols glowing along their hulls. They looked designed for one purpose: war. "They're hailing us," Amy announced. "Audio only." "Put it through," Morrison said. A harsh, grating voice filled the bridge. The words were alien, but the ship's computer translated them in real time. "Primitive vessel, you have entered territory controlled by the Zenthari Collective. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Morrison exchanged glances with his crew. The message wasn't a greeting or a question. It was a command, delivered with absolute confidence. "This is Captain Daniel Morrison of the human vessel Horizon's Edge," he replied, keeping his voice calm and professional. "We mean no harm. We're on a peaceful exploration mission. We didn't know this space was claimed." There was a pause, then the alien voice returned, this time with a tone that might have been amusement. "Humans, we have not heard of your species. It does not matter. You will surrender your vessel and your technology. This is not a negotiation." Morrison felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting emotional wouldn't help. "We can't do that. This ship belongs to Earth and the United Defense Coalition. If you want to talk, we can arrange a proper diplomatic meeting." The response was immediate. "You refuse the Zenthari? You are either very brave or very stupid. We will take your ship by force." The communication cut off. Morrison turned to Amy. "Shields up. Weapons ready, but don't fire unless I give the order." "Yes, sir," Amy said, her hands moving quickly. The 7 alien ships spread out, surrounding the horizon's edge in a loose formation. Morrison watched them carefully, noting their positions and movements. They were confident, moving like predators circling wounded prey. "Captain, they're charging some kind of weapon," Amy warned. "Energy signature is off the charts." "Evasive maneuvers," Morrison ordered. But before the helmsman could react, a wave of electromagnetic energy slammed into the horizon's edge. Every light on the bridge flickered and died. Screens went dark. The hum of the engines faded to silence. For a moment, the bridge was completely dark and quiet. Morrison could hear his own heartbeat in the stillness. "They hit us with an EMP," Greg said from somewhere in the darkness. "Knocked out everything." Morrison grabbed a flashlight from an emergency kit near his chair. Other crew members did the same, and soon the bridge was lit by a dozen small beams of light. "How long to get systems back online?" Morrison asked. Greg was already moving toward his console, even though it was dead. "Give me 10 minutes. Maybe 15. I built redundancies into our systems, but I've never tested them against something like this." Morrison nodded, though Greg probably couldn't see it in the dark. "Do it. Amy, As soon as we have power, I want a full tactical analysis. The crew worked in near silence, illuminated only by flashlights and the distant stars visible through the viewport. Outside, the alien ships moved closer, no doubt preparing to board. 7 minutes passed. Then 8. Morrison could see the alien ships now, close enough that their hulls reflected the light from distant stars. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. Screens came to life with a cascade of data. The engine hum returned, growing stronger by the second. "We're back," Greg announced, a hint of pride in his voice. All systems operational. Amy was already at her station, her fingers flying across the controls. "Captain, the alien ships are moving into boarding positions. They're not expecting us to be operational this fast." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. The Zenthari had made a mistake. They assumed human technology was as vulnerable as theirs would be to an EMP. They didn't know about Greg's quantum redundant systems, the backup power cores, the isolated networks that could reboot independently. "Charge the railgun," Morrison ordered. "Target the lead ship. I want a shot across their bow close enough to make them think twice." "Sir, their shields are up," Amy said. "According to our scans, they're incredibly strong." "Let's test that theory," Morrison replied. The railgun was one of humanity's oldest weapons, updated with modern technology. It used magnetic acceleration to fire solid projectiles at incredible speeds. No energy shields, no fancy tech, just physics and engineering. "Ready to fire," Amy reported. "Fire." The ship shuddered slightly as the railgun discharged. A tungsten rod, no bigger than a baseball bat, shot through space at a velocity that made it more dangerous than any missile. It hit the lead alien ship's shields and punched straight through like they weren't even there. The rod continued on, passing through the ship's hull on one side and out the other, leaving 2 perfectly round holes. The alien ship began to spin, atmosphere venting from the holes, lights flickering along its hull. The other 6 ships immediately backed away, their formation breaking apart in confusion. Morrison watched them retreat and felt a grim satisfaction. The Zenthari had expected easy prey. Instead, they found something they didn't understand: humans who refused to be victims. "Send them another message," Morrison said. "Tell them we don't want a war, but we won't surrender. If they want to talk like civilized beings, we're willing to listen. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they won't forget." Amy sent the message. For a long moment, there was no response. The alien ships held their distance, probably arguing among themselves about what to do. Finally, the harsh voice returned. This time it sounded less confident. "You have weapons we did not anticipate. The Zenthari Collective will remember this. We will meet again, humans." The 7 ships turned and accelerated away, disappearing into the darkness of space. Morrison let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His crew looked shaken but proud. They had faced an unknown enemy and survived. "Set course for Earth," Morrison ordered, "and send a full report to Fleet Command. They need to know what we found out here." As the horizon's edge turned toward home, Morrison stared at the spot where the alien ships had been. He knew this wasn't over. The Zenthari would be back, probably with more ships and better preparation. But they had learned something important today. They had learned that humans wouldn't bow down. They had learned that human weapons were more dangerous than they looked. Most importantly, they had learned that humanity had a will that couldn't be broken by threats or shows of force. The encounter had lasted less than an hour, but Morrison knew it had changed everything. Humanity wasn't alone in the universe, and their neighbors weren't friendly. The days of peaceful exploration were over. The war was coming. The news from the horizon's edge reached Earth within hours through quantum communication arrays. In a secure facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Frank Carter sat in a dark room filled with screens, watching Captain Morrison's report for the 3rd time. Each viewing made the situation clearer and more dangerous. The Zenthari Collective was real. They were hostile, and they had just discovered humanity. Admiral Carter was 62 years old, with gray hair and lines around his eyes from decades of military service. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before humanity unified under the United Defense Coalition. He knew what war looked like, what it cost, and what it took to win. He pressed a button on his desk. "Get me the President and the Defense Secretary. Emergency meeting in 30 minutes. 28 minutes later, Admiral Carter entered the Situation Room where President Helen Brooks and Defense Secretary Paul Martinez were already waiting. President Brooks was a tall woman in her 50s, known for her steady leadership during the Mars colony crisis 5 years ago. Paul Martinez was younger, 43, a former general who understood both politics and warfare. "Show them the footage," Admiral Carter said to his aide. The screens came alive with the encounter between the Horizon's Edge and the Xanthari ships. They watched as the alien vessels surrounded the human ship, fired their EMP weapon, and then retreated in confusion after the railgun strike. "My God," President Brooks said quietly. "They tried to disable us like we were primitives with clubs." "They got a surprise," Paul Martinez added. "But they'll be back, and next time they'll be ready for our weapons." Admiral Carter nodded. "That's my assessment as well. The Xanthari sound like an empire used to getting their way. They won't forget this insult. We need to decide our next move now before they make theirs." President Brooks leaned back in her chair thinking, "What are our options?" "Three main choices," Admiral Carter said, pulling up a tactical map on the screen. 1, we pull back all our exploration ships and fortify our current systems. Play defense and hope the Xanthari lose interest. 2, we try diplomacy, send an ambassador with proper escorts to open negotiations. 3, we prepare for war and strike first before they can organize. "Option 3 is madness," President Brooks said immediately. "We know almost nothing about them. How many ships they have, what their territory looks like, who their allies are. We'd be attacking blind." "Agreed," Paul Martinez said. "Option 1 seems cowardly, though. We'd be giving up exploration and letting them think we're afraid." "Which leaves diplomacy," President Brooks concluded. "But we need to do it from a position of strength. Admiral, how long would it take to mobilize our defense fleet?" Admiral Carter consulted his tablet. "To get our full fleet operational and positioned? 3 weeks minimum. But I can have a significant force ready in 1 week if I pull ships from patrol duties." "Do it," President Brooks ordered. "Get them ready, and I want every defensive installation checked and upgraded. If the Xanthari come to Earth, I want them to face more than they can handle." "What about the ambassador?" Paul Martinez asked. President Brooks thought for a moment. "Kevin Wright. He handled the Titan negotiations brilliantly. He's calm under pressure and he doesn't back down from bullies. Send him with a proper escort and our best scientific team. We'll show them we want peace, but we're not afraid of war." 2 days later, Ambassador Kevin Wright stood in the hangar bay of the diplomatic vessel Peacekeeper, watching as his team loaded equipment and supplies. He was a man of average height, 51 years old, with dark skin and eyes that missed nothing. He had negotiated treaties on 4 continents and 3 colony worlds. But this was different. This was first contact with a hostile alien empire. "Ambassador Wright?" a voice called from behind him. He turned to see a woman in marine dress uniform approaching. She had short blonde hair, sharp features, and the confident walk of someone who had seen combat. "Colonel Lisa Brennan," she introduced herself. "I'll be commanding your security detail." Kevin shook her hand. "How many Marines are you bringing?" 50 of our best," Lisa replied. "All with experience in hostile environments. Plus, we've got the new powered armor and Gauss rifles. If things go bad, we can fight our way out." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Kevin said. But he was glad to have her along. Lisa Brennan had a reputation as one of the toughest officers in the Marines. Over the next hour, the rest of the team arrived. Dr. Charles Kim was a physicist and engineer who had helped design many of humanity's most advanced weapons systems. He brought cases full of technology to demonstrate during negotiations. There were also linguists, cultural specialists, and military advisors. The journey to the Xanthari homeworld took 6 days through hyperspace. During that time, Kevin reviewed everything they knew about the Xanthari, which wasn't much. They seemed to be a warrior culture that valued strength above all else. They had conquered multiple species and forced them into their collective. They didn't negotiate. They commanded. "We need to show them we're strong," Lisa Brennan said during one planning meeting. "If we seem weak or desperate, they'll walk all over us." "But we also need to appear reasonable," Kevin countered. "If we're too aggressive, they might attack out of pride." Dr. Charles Kim looked up from his notes. "We need to impress them. Show them technology they don't have, weapons they can't match. Make them think twice about fighting us." Kevin nodded slowly, a demonstration of strength wrapped in an offer of peace. It might work. When they finally arrived in Xanthari space, 3 warships immediately intercepted them. The alien ships were massive and covered in weapon batteries. A message came through in the harsh Xanthari language. "State your purpose or be destroyed." Kevin took a deep breath and stepped up to the communication console. This is Ambassador Kevin Wright representing the United Defense Coalition of Earth. We come in peace to establish diplomatic relations with the Zenthari Collective. We request an audience with your leadership. There was a long pause. Then the response came, dripping with contempt. The High Council will see you. But know this, human. You walk into our domain at our mercy. One wrong move and your ship will be destroyed. The warships escorted the Peacekeeper to the Zenthari homeworld, a large planet covered in red deserts and dark oceans. Cities sprawled across the surface, connected by massive structures that looked like a mix of military fortifications and industrial complexes. They landed at a designated spaceport, where hundreds of alien beings moved about, loading cargo and maintaining ships. The Zenthari themselves were impressive creatures, standing nearly 7 feet tall with gray skin, powerful builds, and faces that looked both reptilian and fierce. They wore armor even in civilian areas, and every one of them carried at least one weapon. Kevin and his team were led through the spaceport by armed guards. The Zenthari watched them with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Some pointed and made comments in their language that the translators didn't fully catch, but the tone was clear. They saw humans as weak and inferior. The High Council met in a massive hall with high ceilings and walls covered in weapons and battle trophies from countless wars. 7 Zenthari elders sat on raised platforms, looking down at the humans like judges examining criminals. The central elder, who introduced himself as Morkash, spoke first. His voice was deep and filled with authority. Humans, we have heard of your encounter with our patrol fleet. You damaged one of our ships. This is an act of war. Kevin stepped forward, keeping his expression calm. With respect, Elder Morkash, your ships attacked us without warning. We defended ourselves. We don't seek war with the Zenthari. We seek mutual understanding and peaceful coexistence. Morkash's eyes narrowed. There is no coexistence with the Zenthari. There is only the collective and those who serve it. You will join us, provide us with your technology and accept our rule, or you will be destroyed. The other elders nodded in agreement. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a demand. Kevin felt Lisa Brennan tense beside him, but he kept his voice steady. We cannot accept those terms. Humanity values freedom and independence. We're willing to trade, to share knowledge on equal terms, to form alliances. But we will not submit to any foreign power. Morkash laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the hall. You speak of equality as if you have any power here. You are a young species who barely understands the galaxy. We have ruled this sector for 1,000 years. What makes you think you can refuse us? Because we are not like the others you have conquered, Kevin said firmly. We are human, and humans do not surrender. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The elders stared at Kevin with expressions that mixed surprise, anger, and something that might have been respect. Bold words, Morkash said finally. Perhaps you believe them. We shall see. Tomorrow there will be a demonstration. Both sides will show their military capabilities. Then we will talk again about submission. Kevin nodded. We accept. But know this. What you see tomorrow is only a fraction of what humanity can do. We don't want war, but we're ready for it if you force our hand. The meeting ended with tension thick in the air. As Kevin and his team were escorted to guest quarters, Lisa leaned close and whispered, "That went better than I expected." "They're testing us," Kevin replied. "Tomorrow is the real challenge, Dr. Kim, I hope." The demonstration grounds stretched across 10 miles of barren desert outside the Zenthari capital. Thousands of alien spectators gathered on elevated platforms to watch, many of them military officers eager to see the humans humiliated. The morning sun beat down on the red sand, creating heat waves that distorted the air. Ambassador Kevin Wright stood with his team in a shaded area, watching the Zenthari prepare their display. Colonel Lisa Brennan had her Marines positioned nearby, their powered armor gleaming in the sunlight. Dr. Charles Kim supervised the setup of human equipment, carefully arranging everything for maximum impact. Elder Morkash arrived with the other council members, taking seats on the highest platform. He gestured for the demonstration to begin. The Zenthari will show you why resistance is futile. Watch and understand your place. The first Zenthari display began with a squad of soldiers marching onto the field. They wore heavy armor that covered every inch of their bodies, dark metal plates that looked nearly indestructible. Each soldier carried a plasma rifle that hummed with contained energy. At Morkash's signal, targets appeared at the far end of the field, simple metal plates set up in a row. The Zenthari soldiers opened fire. Blue-white plasma bolts streaked across the distance, hitting the targets with devastating effect. The metal plates melted instantly, turning into pools of liquid that sizzled on the sand. The crowd cheered. The Zenthari warriors raised their weapons in triumph. Impressive, Kevin said to Lisa quietly. But plasma weapons have limitations. Wait until they see what we brought, Lisa replied with a slight smile. The next Zenthari demonstration showcased their energy shields. A single soldier stood in the center of the field while others fired at him from all directions. The shots struck an invisible barrier around him, dispersing harmlessly in cascades of energy. The shield flickered but held, protecting the soldier completely. Morkash addressed Kevin from his platform. Our shields can withstand any energy weapon in the galaxy. They are powered by fusion cores that run for days without recharging. Your primitive kinetic weapons may have caught us by surprise once, but we have already adapted. Our new shield configurations will stop your railguns. Kevin nodded politely but said nothing. Dr. Kim had warned him about this. The Zenthari thought in terms of energy and power. They would upgrade their shields to handle more kinetic impact, thinking that solved the problem. The final Zenthari display brought out their combat mechs. These were massive machines, 30 feet tall, piloted by warriors sitting in protected cockpits. The mechs carried weapons on both arms, plasma cannons, missile launchers, and rotary guns. They moved across the field with surprising speed despite their size, firing at targets and obstacles, reducing everything to rubble. The crowd was ecstatic. Many of the alien spectators looked at the humans with pity, already imagining them crushed beneath Zenthari superiority. Morkash stood. That is the might of the Zenthari collective. Your turn, humans. Show us what you have, so we may better understand the gap between our peoples. Kevin walked forward, his team following. He had practiced this speech in his mind a dozen times during the journey here. The Zenthari have shown impressive technology, power, strength, and durability. But humans approach warfare differently. We don't rely on brute force alone. We use precision, efficiency, and adaptability. He gestured to Dr. Kim, who stepped forward carrying a case no larger than a suitcase. Charles set it on a table and opened it, revealing a compact device with cooling fins and a soft blue glow. This is a portable fusion reactor, Charles explained to the assembled crowd. It produces the same power as your facility-based reactors, but weighs less than 50 pounds. A single human soldier can carry enough power to run advanced equipment for a week. Murmurs ran through the Zenthari crowd. Their own fusion technology required massive installations. The idea of something this small and efficient clearly troubled them. That's just a power source, Morkash said dismissively. What of weapons? Lisa Brennan stepped forward, her Marines forming up behind her. They wore powered armor that was sleeker than the Zenthari version, with integrated systems that made them look almost graceful, rather than bulky. Lisa held a Gauss rifle, a weapon that used magnetic acceleration to fire projectiles. Colonel, if you would demonstrate, Kevin said. Lisa nodded and aimed at a target 500 yards away. She fired 3 quick shots. The Gauss rifle made a distinctive crack with each shot, and the targets exploded into fragments. But then Lisa adjusted a setting on her weapon and aimed at a new target. This time the shot passed through the target without exploding, leaving a perfectly round hole. Adjustable penetration, Lisa explained. We can blow targets apart or punch through armor cleanly, depending on the situation. The weapon uses no energy beyond the initial magnetic charge, which our power packs provide. It works in any environment, vacuum, underwater, extreme cold, or heat. Energy weapons fail in many of these conditions. She gestured to her squad. Our armor includes reactive camouflage, allowing us to blend into any environment. It has built-in medical systems that can treat injuries automatically. And the strength enhancement allows a soldier to carry 10 times their body weight without strain. One of her Marines demonstrated by lifting a piece of equipment that would normally require 3 men to move. He held it overhead with one hand, steady and controlled. The Zenthari crowd had gone quiet. These humans were showing technology that matched or exceeded their own in several areas. It wasn't what they had expected. Clever toys, Morkash said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. But what of large-scale weapons? Your railgun surprised our patrol, but surely that was your most powerful weapon. Kevin smiled slightly. Dr. Kim, the final demonstration, please. Charles moved to a communication panel and entered a series of commands. High above, in orbit around the planet, the diplomatic vessel Peacekeeper had been waiting. Now at Charles's signal, it fired a single shot from its magnetic accelerator cannon. The shot was carefully calculated. It targeted a rocky mountain peak 30 miles away, visible in the distance. The tungsten projectile entered the atmosphere at tremendous speed, its surface glowing from friction. It struck the mountain peak with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The ground shook. A thunderous boom rolled across the desert. The mountain peak simply disappeared, turned to dust and debris that formed a massive cloud. When the dust began to settle, the top 1,000 feet of the mountain were gone, sheared off cleanly. The Zenthari crowd stood in shocked silence. Many of them had never seen such precise, devastating power. Their own weapons could destroy mountains, but with massive energy expenditure and obvious preparation. This had been a single shot from orbit, fired with computer-guided accuracy. That shot used no explosive materials, Charles explained into the silence. Just a solid projectile accelerated to high velocity. The kinetic energy alone caused the destruction. We can fire these shots from anywhere in a solar system and hit targets with precision measured in inches. And unlike energy weapons, there's no signature, no warning, no way to block it with conventional shields. Morcash was standing now, his expression difficult to read. The other elders were speaking among themselves in urgent tones. There's something else you should know, Kevin said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. While we've been here, our intelligence teams have been analyzing your communications. We know the Zenthari Collective isn't just an alliance. It's an empire built on conquest and fear. The species in your collective aren't your allies. They're your slaves. Angry shouts erupted from the Zenthari warriors in the crowd, but Morcash raised his hand for silence. His eyes were cold as he stared at Kevin. You overstep, human. What we do with lesser species is our concern. It becomes our concern when you try to add humanity to your list of conquests, Kevin replied firmly. We've intercepted your messages. You're already contacting other species, trying to form a coalition to attack Earth. You're using threats and intimidation to force them to join you. Morcash didn't deny it. We do what is necessary to maintain order in this sector. The Zenthari bring stability through strength. The Zenthari bring oppression through violence, Kevin countered. But here's what you need to understand. Humanity doesn't just refuse to be conquered. We refuse to stand by while others are enslaved. If you attack us, we will fight. And when we fight, we will break your empire and free every species you've subjugated. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Morcash's expression shifted from anger to something more calculating. He was beginning to understand that humans weren't just another species to be absorbed into the collective. They were something different, something dangerous. Bold words from such a small species, Morcash said finally. You have a handful of worlds. We have hundreds. You have one fleet. We have thousands of ships. You cannot win. Maybe not, Kevin admitted. A war between us would be brutal and costly for both sides. Millions would die. Worlds would burn. Is that what you want? Or would you rather find another path? What path? Morcash demanded. You refuse to join us. You threaten to destroy us. What compromise exists? Freedom, Kevin said simply. Let the species in your collective choose their own paths. If they want to stay allied with you, let them decide that freely. Captain Daniel Morrison stood in the briefing room of the Horizon's Edge, studying the holographic display floating above the table. The image showed a distant star system called Vorum, home to a species that had been part of the Zenthari Collective for over a century, according to the intelligence that Ambassador Wright had managed to smuggle out before communications went dark. The Vorum were engineers who maintained much of the Zenthari war machine under constant threat. It's a long shot, Lieutenant Amy Grant said, standing beside him. We don't know if the Vorum will help us or turn us over to the Zenthari. It's not about certainty anymore, Morrison replied. It's about changing the game. The Zenthari expect us to turtle up and defend Earth. Instead, we're going to break their empire from the inside. The door opened and Commander Jake Sullivan entered, followed by his special operations team. Jake was 38, built like a tank with scars on his hands from a dozen classified missions. His team consisted of 12 operators, the best humanity had to offer in terms of combat skills and tactical thinking. "Captain," Jake said with a nod, "we're ready to deploy whenever you give the word." Morrison gestured to the hologram. The Vorum system, population of 8 billion, mostly concentrated on 3 planets. The Xanthari maintain garrison forces on each planet, about 5,000 soldiers total. The Vorum have no military of their own, at least not officially. But unofficially? Jake asked. Unofficially, our intel suggests there's a resistance movement. They sabotage Xanthari equipment, slow down production, spread information about the outside galaxy. They're led by someone named Kelra, a Vorum who lost her family in a Xanthari punishment raid 20 years ago. Greg Palmer pulled up additional data. The Vorum are natural engineers. They built most of the infrastructure in this sector before the Xanthari conquered them. If we can get them on our side, they know every weakness in Xanthari military hardware. Morrison turned to his crew. Here's the plan. We take the new stealth ship Night Runner into Vorum space. She's equipped with adaptive hull plating that absorbs sensor scans instead of reflecting them. To the Xanthari will look like background radiation. We make contact with the resistance, provide them with weapons and support, and help them start a rebellion. And if the Xanthari catch us? Amy asked. Then we fight our way out, Jake said simply. That's why I'm bringing my team. We've trained for hostile territory operations, urban warfare, guerrilla tactics, asset extraction. This is what we do. Morrison looked around the room at his crew. They had been through so much already, from the first encounter with the Xanthari to multiple reconnaissance missions since then. They were tired, but their eyes showed determination. I won't lie to you, Morrison said. This is dangerous. If we succeed, we start a chain reaction that could tear apart the Xanthari collective. If we fail, we probably start a war that could destroy Earth. But doing nothing isn't an option anymore. Ambassador Wright is still trapped on the Xanthari homeworld. Admiral Carter is preparing our defenses, but defense alone won't save us. We need allies. Then let's go make some, Greg said with a slight grin. The Night Runner was unlike any ship Morrison had ever commanded. She was small, designed for a crew of only 20, with systems that prioritize stealth over firepower. Her hull seemed to shimmer and shift, never quite the same color twice. Greg explained that the adaptive plating used quantum sensors to detect incoming scans and adjust its properties to absorb them. The journey to Vorum space took 5 days through hyperspace. During that time, Jake's team trained constantly, running simulations of different scenarios. They practiced with the weapons they would bring to the Vorum: compact Gauss rifles, plasma cutters disguised as toolkits, and small fusion charges that could destroy. Xanthari installations, Dr. Charles Kim had provided them with something special. A portable fabricator that could produce ammunition and basic weapons using raw materials. If the Vorum rebellion succeeded, they would need to arm thousands of fighters quickly. The fabricator would let them do that without relying on supply lines from Earth. When they finally entered Vorum space, Morrison ordered all non-essential systems powered down. The Night Runner drifted through the outer system like a ghost, invisible to the Xanthari sensor stations scattered throughout the region. Amy worked her console carefully, searching for signs of the resistance. According to the intelligence, they used coded transmissions hidden inside normal commercial traffic. It took her 6 hours, but she finally found the pattern. Got it, she announced, broadcasting on an obscure frequency, encrypted with a mathematical sequence. It's definitely not Xanthari. Morrison authorized a narrow beam transmission back using the decryption keys that Ambassador Wright had provided. This is Captain Daniel Morrison of Earth. We're looking for Kelra. We want to help. There was no response for several minutes. Then a voice came through, speaking in the Vorum language with a translator converting it to English in real time. The voice was female, cautious, and hard. Earth? We know of no Earth. Who are you, really? We're human, Morrison replied. A species the Xanthari tried to conquer. We refused. Now we're offering the same chance to others. Freedom from the collective, another pause. The Xanthari do not let conquered species go free. You're lying or you're dead. We're neither, Morrison said. We fought them off. And we're here to show you that the Xanthari can be beaten. Give us coordinates. Let us meet face to face. The transmission cut off. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then a new set of coordinates appeared on their screens, pointing to a location on Vorum Prime, the main inhabited planet. It could be a trap, Amy warned. Only one way to find out, Morrison replied. He turned to Jake. Commander Sullivan, your team is up. Get down there, make contact, and assess the situation. We'll stay in orbit, ready to extract you if things go wrong. Jake and his team suited up in light combat armor designed to look like civilian clothing from a distance. They carried concealed weapons and emergency beacons. The Night Runner dropped them off in a remote area outside one of the major Vorum cities, using the cover of night to avoid detection. Morrison watched from orbit as Jake's team made their way toward the coordinates. The city was massive, with towers reaching into the clouds and streets packed with Vorum citizens. The aliens looked almost human from a distance, bipedal, roughly the same size, but with silvery skin and large eyes adapted for low light. Zenthari patrols were everywhere, soldiers in their heavy armor watching the crowds with obvious suspicion. The Vorum moved around them carefully, avoiding eye contact, keeping their heads down. It was the behavior of a people who had learned that attracting attention meant pain. Jake's team split up, moving through the city in pairs to avoid suspicion. The coordinates led them to an industrial district where factories produced components for Zenthari ships and weapons. Jake approached a particular warehouse and knocked on a side door using a specific pattern. The door opened slightly. Eyes peered out, examining him. Then the door swung open and Jake was pulled inside quickly. Morrison listened through Jake's comlink as the commander introduced himself. There were at least 20 Vorum in the warehouse, all of them armed with crude weapons, sharpened metal, chemical explosives, stolen Zenthari tools modified into weapons. I'm Kellera, one of the Vorum said. She was taller than the others, with scars on her arms and a fierce expression. You're really human? From this Earth? Yes, Jake confirmed. We're new to this part of the galaxy. The Zenthari found us a few weeks ago and tried to force us into their collective. We said no. And they just let you go? Kellera asked skeptically. They didn't have a choice, Jake replied. He pulled out a tablet and showed her footage from the encounter with the Zenthari patrol fleet, then the demonstration on the Zenthari homeworld. The Vorum gathered around, watching with growing amazement. You destroyed their ship, one of them whispered. You made Elder Morcash back down. We did, Jake confirmed. And we're offering you the same chance. Fight with us. We'll provide weapons, training, and support. Together we can free your people from Zenthari control. Kellera studied him carefully. Why? What do you gain from this? Allies, Jake said honestly. The Zenthari are planning to attack Earth. They're building a coalition of every species they control. If we can break their empire apart, we reduce the forces they can bring against us. But more than that, it's the right thing to do. Humanity has a saying, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Your freedom and ours are connected. The Vorum talked among themselves in their own language, too quick for the translator to keep up. Finally, Kellera turned back to Jake. The Zenthari have kept us enslaved for 100 years. They killed anyone who resisted, destroyed cities as examples, made us build the weapons they used to conquer others. We've dreamed of freedom, but we never had the power to take it. She paused, and Morrison could see the emotion on her face even through the video feed. If you're offering us that power, if you're truly willing to help us fight, then yes. The Vorum will stand with humanity. Jake nodded and opened the cases his team had brought. Inside were Gauss rifles, body armor, and the portable fabricator. This is just the beginning. Show me your production facilities and I'll show you. Elder Morcash stood in the command center of his flagship Dominator, watching the holographic display with barely contained rage. 3 Vorum worlds had fallen to rebellion. 5,000 Zenthari soldiers were dead or captured. And behind it all were the humans, the species he had dismissed as primitive and weak just weeks ago. How did this happen? He demanded of his officers. The Vorum have been pacified for a century. They had no weapons, no training, no means to resist. One of his tactical officers, a younger warrior named Tekvor, stepped forward cautiously. The humans provided them with advanced weapons and training. Our garrison forces reported seeing technology they couldn't match. The Vorum fighters moved with coordination that suggested professional military instruction. Morcash slammed his fist on the command console. Then we will crush them. All of them. The Vorum, the humans, and any other species that dares to defy the collective. Assemble the war fleet, every ship we have. We will make an example of Earth that will be remembered for 1,000 years. Elder Morcash, another officer said hesitantly. There are reports of unrest on other worlds. The Soral, the Draviks, the Kelton. They're all watching what happened in Vorum space. If we pull too many ships from garrison duties to attack Earth, we risk more rebellions. Let them try, Morkash snarled. Once we destroy Earth and show the galaxy what happens to those who resist us, the others will fall back in line. Fear has kept our empire together for centuries. We just need to make them afraid again. Orders went out across Zenthari space. Every available warship was to converge on the Sol system. The Zenthari were gathering a fleet of over 2,000 ships, the largest armada they had assembled in generations. It would take time to bring them all together, but Morkash was willing to wait. He wanted Earth to see what was coming, to feel the dread of inevitable destruction. On Earth, Admiral Frank Carter watched the intelligence reports with grim determination. The orbital defense grid was fully operational, with 300 satellites, positioned in strategic locations around the planet. Each one carried kinetic bombardment weapons capable of hitting targets with devastating accuracy. The Sentinel program had produced 5,000 automated defense drones, their AI systems programmed with every combat tactic humanity had ever developed. But it wouldn't be enough. The Zenthari were bringing 2,000 ships. Even with advanced weapons and tactics, the numbers were overwhelming. "We need the Allies," Admiral Carter said during an emergency meeting with President Helen Brooks and the military command staff. "The Vorim, the Soral, the Draviks, every species that's willing to stand with us." Captain Morrison reports that 4 more species have made contact, President Brooks said. "They're all preparing to rebel against the Zenthari, but they need time, and they need more support than we can provide while defending Earth." "Then we don't wait for the Zenthari to come to us," suggested General Patricia Lopez, head of the Space Marine Corps. "We take the fight to them, hit their supply lines, their staging areas, their communication hubs, make them fight on multiple fronts so they can't concentrate their full force on Earth." Admiral Carter nodded slowly. "It's risky. We'd be dividing our own forces. But you're right. If we just sit here and wait, they'll bring everything they have straight to our doorstep." The decision was made. Earth's fleet, now numbering 400 ships of various classes, would split into multiple task forces. Some would defend Earth directly. Others would support the rebellion spreading across former Zenthari space, and a few would strike at Zenthari strategic targets, forcing them to respond and divide their attention. Captain Morrison and the Night Runner were assigned to support the Soral rebellion. The Soral were master navigators who knew hyperspace routes that the Zenthari didn't. With human weapons and Soral knowledge of hidden paths, they could hit targets and disappear before reinforcements arrived. Meanwhile, Ambassador Kevin Wright and his team were still on the Zenthari homeworld. Technically guests, but effectively hostages. Lisa Brennan had positioned her Marines in defensive positions around their quarters, expecting the Zenthari to attack at any moment once news of the rebellions reached the capital. "They're going to blame us," Lisa said, checking her Gauss rifle for the 3rd time that hour. "When Morkash finds out about Vorim, he'll take it out on us." Kevin stood by the window watching Zenthari soldiers gathering in the streets below. He could see the anger in their movements, the way they formed into combat units and checked their weapons. They already know. Look at them. They're preparing for something. Dr. Charles Kim was working frantically at a makeshift communications array, trying to contact the Peacekeeper in orbit. "I can't get through. They're jamming all our signals. We're cut off." The door to their quarters burst open. A squad of Zenthari soldiers stormed in, weapons raised. Their commander, a scarred veteran named Cormac, pointed at Kevin. "You are under arrest for crimes against the Zenthari Collective, conspiracy, espionage, and inciting rebellion." "On what evidence?" Kevin demanded, keeping his voice steady, despite his racing heart. "The Vorim rebellion used human weapons," Cormac said flatly. "Human tactics, human training. You came here, claiming to seek peace while your people armed our slaves. Elder Morkash has declared you enemies of the Collective." Lisa stepped forward, her Marines forming up behind her. "You try to take us, and this becomes a battlefield. Is that what you want in the middle of your capital city?" Cormac smiled coldly. "You are 50 soldiers. We have 50,000 in this city alone. You cannot win." "Maybe not," Lisa agreed. But we'll take a lot of you with us, and the footage will be broadcast across the galaxy. Every species in your collective will see you murder diplomats. How many more rebellions do you think that will inspire? The standoff stretched for long seconds. Then Charles Kim did something unexpected. He triggered a device in his pocket, and suddenly, every screen in the capital city flickered and changed. The Zenthari communication systems had been hacked, and now they were broadcasting footage. The Vorum Rebellion, the freed planets, the Zenthari garrison forces surrendering to former slaves, and over it all, a message in multiple languages. The Zenthari can be beaten. Rise up. Be free. Cormac's expression turned from anger to shock. Throughout the city, Zenthari citizens and conquered species were seeing the truth. Their empire was crumbling. The unbeatable Zenthari had been defeated by former slaves armed with human weapons. You just declared war, Cormac said quietly. No, Kevin replied. You declared war when you tried to enslave us. We're just fighting back. The shooting started seconds later. Lisa's Marines opened fire, their Gauss rifles cutting through Zenthari armor with terrifying efficiency. The aliens returned fire with plasma weapons, but in the confined space the humans had the advantage. Their armor was lighter, allowing them to move faster, and their weapons didn't overheat like plasma rifles. The battle spilled into the streets as Lisa led a fighting retreat toward the spaceport. They had one chance: reach the Peacekeeper and escape before the entire Zenthari military descended on them. Charles triggered another surprise. Small bombs he had hidden throughout the capital during their stay, set on timers. They weren't large, enough to cause serious casualties, but they created chaos, forcing the Zenthari to divert forces to deal with the explosions. Above the planet, the Peacekeeper's crew was monitoring the situation. When they saw the ambassador's team fighting in the streets, they knew what had to be done. The ship's captain, a veteran named Gary Fletcher, ordered all weapons systems online. We're going to extract them, Gary announced to his crew. And if the Zenthari try to stop us, we're going to show them why you don't mess with human diplomats. The Peacekeeper descended through the atmosphere, its shields deflecting defensive fire from ground installations. It positioned itself over the spaceport, weapons targeting any Zenthari forces that tried to pursue the ambassador's team. Kevin, Lisa, and the Marines fought their way across the spaceport tarmac, their numbers reduced to 30 now. They had left bodies behind, both human and Zenthari. But they had also accomplished something. They had proven that humans wouldn't be bullied even in the heart of enemy territory. As they boarded the Peacekeeper, the ship's weapons opened fire, destroying the spaceport's anti-ship batteries. The Peacekeeper lifted off, accelerating hard toward orbit. Zenthari fighters scrambled to intercept, but the human ship was faster and better armed. It punched through the defensive perimeter and jumped to hyperspace before the Zenthari could organize a proper response. The war had truly begun. 3 weeks later, the Zenthari war fleet arrived at the Sol system. Elder Morcash stood on the bridge of his flagship, expecting to see a terrified planet with weak defenses. Instead, he found a fully militarized system, with defensive satellites, drone swarms, and a fleet ready for battle. All ships advance, Morcash ordered. We will crush them completely. The Zenthari fleet moved forward in a massive wave. They outnumbered the human defenders 5-1. It should have been a slaughter. Then the orbital defense grid activated. 300 satellites opened fire simultaneously, launching kinetic projectiles at relativistic speeds. The first wave of Zenthari ships simply disintegrated, their shields useless against solid tungsten rods moving at a fraction of light speed. Morcash watched in horror.